All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast. And as I continue to talk conference by conference about the upcoming college football season, tonight I'm going to be talking about the Atlantic Coast Conference. Now, the ACC, they've got their fair share of drama right now off the field because we don't know who wants to stay in this league. But nonetheless, I truly do feel that the upcoming college football season in the ACC is going to be a good one. Along with the Big Ten and the SEC, the ACC sent multiple schools to the college football playoff last year. But of course, unlike the Big Ten or the SEC, the ACC did not have any of its members get past the first round, or of course win a game, as both SMU and Clemson were sent home on the first Saturday of the playoff. Nonetheless, I think that this season in the ACC is going to be dynamic. I think people really need to pay attention to the football that is going to be coming forth from this league. I think we're going to have some exciting teams, and we know about the transfer portal in college football, and college sports for that matter. But nonetheless, you could make the case that the ACC is going to have a big time impact due to the portal, especially at the quarterback position. But I'm going to start with the team that won the ACC last year and since 2015 have basically put a blanket over this conference. And I'm talking about the Clemson Tigers. Excuse me. Why? Because since 2015, only two other teams have won the ACC. Pitt did it in 2021, and then Florida State did it in 2023. But it's all been about the Clemson Tigers. And I talked about this when I talked about my college football top 25 last week. Okay. And I got Clemson in the top five. I think they're going to be a legit team this year. And like I've said before, people continue to write off Dabo Sweeney and company, but all he continues to do is win. Last year, Clemson flew under the radar for the bulk of the year, but when the dust settled, the Tigers were the team that was flying the banner as champions of the Atlantic Coast Conference. And of course, with the dawn of a new year in college football, Clemson is once again going to be in that mix. They've got, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the ACC. And I'm talking about Cade Klubnik because he has a potential to be the ACC Player of the Year. A lot of talent on this Clemson team on both sides of the ball. You look at wide receiver Antonio Williams, wide receiver Bryant Westco Jr., and then the linebackers with Wade Wood as well as outside linebacker Sammy Brown. And then you've got to keep an eye out for defensive end TJ Parker, who is going to be in the conversation as far as being the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of us have that first game of the season earmarked for Clemson when they welcome LSU to Tiger Stadium. That's going to be a big one. Some people might doubt Clemson winning the ACC again. I'll tell you like this: if Clemson does it, they're going to earn it. Why? Because they've got Georgia Tech coming to town on the 13th of September. They've got SMU coming to town on the 18th of October. And if anybody remembers that ACC championship game from last December, you know that it was a dandy, all right? Clemson gets Florida State at home in November. The week after that, they're at Louisville. Okay, and I think that game is going to go a long way in determining who gets to Charlotte for the ACC championship game. And then, of course, finishing up the season in Columbia with South Carolina. Now, another surprise team last year in the ACC, and it was the Mustangs of Southern Methodist. It was just their first year in the league, and SMU got all the way to the championship game, and of course, all the way to the college football playoff as well. And, 2023, we saw the Mustangs in their time in the American by winning that league, and they're once again one of the top dogs in their new league. The bottom line is Rhett Lashley, as the head coach of SMU, he knows what he's doing. And I don't think nationally he gets enough credit, but this guy knows the X's and O's, and he knows how to get his team prepared on a Saturday by Saturday basis in order to be ready to play quality football. Quarterback Kevin Jennings, one of the better signal callers in the ACC. I like this defense, which includes free safety Ahmad Moses. And the bottom line is SMU is going to once again be an exciting team. I talked about the matchup when they travel to Clemson on the 18th of October. But how about them getting both Miami and Louisville at home in November? 3 games right there that are going to go a long way in determining who wins this league. Speaking of those Hurricanes, a lot of people had them pegged to win the ACC last year. Not only did they not win the ACC, they didn't get to the ACC championship game or the college football playoff. And you got to wonder if this is going to be the year when things completely come together for Mario Cristobal and his Canes. Last year, it was Cam Ward in the transfer portal from Washington State at quarterback. And of course, we just saw Cam Ward be the first overall pick of the NFL draft by the Titans. This time around, it's former Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. Now, Carson Beck has an interesting story behind him because in the blink of a New York minute, Carson Beck went from possibly being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft to a guy that was injured, and the next thing you know, he hit the transfer portal, left Georgia, and is now at Miami. So when it's all said and done, how healthy is that right arm of Carson Beck going to be? That is the $1 million question for this Miami program. A lot of experience to protect Carson Beck on that offensive line. I have that D. I like this D rather for Miami. The bottom line is, are they going to win enough in order to win the ACC? Very tough schedule for Miami. Okay, they've got Notre Dame at home to begin the season in a couple of weeks. They've got Florida at home next month. At Florida State, you always earmark that game regardless of the records. Then they got Louisville at home as well. November 1st, big one when they travel to SMU. And then, of course, they get Syracuse at home in November as well. And everybody remembers how Syracuse derailed Miami's opportunity to get to the ACC championship game last year. Now, when you talk about top teams in the ACC, routinely, Florida State is going to be in that conversation. However, last year was a season to forget for the Seminoles. They began the year ranked in the top 10, fresh off of going 13-1 in the previous year. Okay. And things fell apart early, and Florida State never recovered from that as they only managed to win 2 games last year. And for those 2 wins, Florida State really had to fight, scrap, and claw. So all eyes are going to be on the Seminoles as they look to bounce back. I've talked about the transfer portal. Florida State is another one of those teams. Didn't work out with DJU at quarterback last year. So now what do you do if you're the Seminoles? You go get former Boston College quarterback Thomas Castellanos and see if this dual threat quarterback is going to have an impact. One thing for sure, okay, for Mike Norvell, he went out there and he got himself a new offensive coordinator. I'm talking about former UCF and former Auburn head coach Gus Malzahn. And of course, things were going south for Gus Malzahn at UCF. He got off of that ship while it was still floating. Now he's going to get back to what he does best. That's calling plays. And I think this guy right here, Thomas Castellanos, is a quality quarterback that could flourish in Gus Malzahn's offensive system. You also brought in the former Tennessee wide receiver in Squirrel Wright. We also saw Florida State hit the portal hard defensively to try to upgrade things. It's going to be interesting to see how much Florida State turns it around. But of course, the first game of the season is going to be the litmus test when they host Alabama. Of course, Florida, they travel to Gainesville at the end of the season, and they've got Miami and Clemson sandwiched in there as well. So I really want to see how Mike Norvell's club bounces back. Speaking of teams that are looking to build, I'm talking about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and under head coach Brent Key, Georgia Tech, rather, is a team that you got to pack a lunch if you're going to face every Saturday because the Yellow Jackets make you earn it. All right. Haynes King is a tough quarterback. I mean, not just throwing the football, He is also a runner. I like this Georgia Tech running game with Jamal Haynes. I like the effort that middle linebacker Kyle Effort gives on a Saturday to Saturday basis. And like I said before, if you're going to beat the Jackets, you're definitely going to have to go out there and pack a lunch and earn them. But Georgia Tech will once again bring it. North Carolina State, they had a disappointing 2024. They finished 6-7. What's the Wolfpack and Dave Doran going to do this year? I like running back Hollywood Smothers. I like tight end Justin Jolly. He could be the best tight end in the ACC for my money. I also like outside linebacker Sean Brown. And I think this defense for Dave Doran that has 8 seniors is going to be formidable in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Now for Louisville, this is a team that I don't think enough people have been talking about nationally, but nonetheless, in just 2 years at his alma mater, Jeff Brom has led the Ville to 19 wins and an appearance in the ACC Championship game. And I got news for you. Louisville is going to be once again one of the top teams in this conference. All right. They lost Tyler Shaw, their quarterback, to the NFL. He was a second round pick by the New Orleans, but they get former USC quarterback Miller Moss. And I think Miller Moss comes into a situation where he actually has a more talented offense around him at Louisville than he did with USC. You look at this loaded running back room with the likes of Isaac Brown, Duke Watson, and Keywan Brown, as well as wide receiver Chris Bell. A lot of experience on his offensive line. So this Louisville offense is going to be legit. Linebackers like TJ Quinn and Stanquan Clark. The Cardinals, they can be a very scary team this year. Okay, they're at Miami on the 17th of October. They get Clemson at home. And if you remember, Louisville went to Clemson last year and beat the Tigers. And they were the only team in the ACC that could say they beat Clemson last year. They've got to go to SMU on the 22nd of November. That's going to be a big game right there. But nonetheless, Louisville is going to be one of the top teams in this league. Now, for the Cal Bears, they were able to do just enough to be bowl eligible last year in their first year in the ACC. Let's see if Cal can find a way to make more of an impact this year. But nonetheless, with this Justin Wilcox-led squad, they are always going to be tough. Virginia, we saw them knock on the door last year for head coach Tony Elliott. And, this time around, will he be able to get them to that first bowl bid since 2019? That's going to be big for this program. Tony Elliott has been working hard to try to turn things around for the Cavaliers. Hopefully, it all comes together this year in Charlottesville. For Syracuse and Fran Brown, it's one of those situations. I don't think he's going to stay at Syracuse long term, my opinion. I think one of these bigger programs, and no offense to a Syracuse, I think somebody's going to scoop him up because Fran Brown is showing that he is the real deal. Syracuse might take a step back this year in comparison to what they were last year, but I think the Orange are still going to be a team that a lot of people don't want to face around this league. North Carolina. It is safe to say that this might arguably be the most anticipated football season in the history of this program. Why? Because the arrival of Bill Belichick as North Carolina's head coach. And of course, we know about Belichick and what he has done in the NFL. We're talking about a guy who won 6 Super Bowl titles as a head coach of the New England Patriots, 2 more as a defensive coordinator of the New York Giants. But the 73-year-old has never coached collegiately. And you got to wonder if Belichick's message is going to be get across to a room full of 19 and 20-year-olds. We got to wait and see. Some people are writing Belichick off. I want to see what he's going to do, and I'm really excited. And I'm really anticipating this season for North Carolina because I want to see if the guy can get it done at the collegiate level. For Pitt and head coach Pat Narduzzi, 2024 was a tale of 2 seasons. They won their first 7, only to lose their final 6. Which Pitt team are we going to see this year? That's going to be a big question mark right there. For Virginia Tech, you got Kyron Drones, a senior at quarterback. You've got middle linebacker Jaden Keller, who is also a senior. And I really want to see if the Hokies can make some noise in this league. You look at Boston College. They've had their fair share of ups and downs under Bill O'Brien, but nonetheless, they just lost quarterback Thomas Castellanos in the portal to Florida State. How much is that going to impact this BC team? We got to wait and see. Nonetheless, Bill O'Brien, I think this is the perfect spot for him to be in, and I think BC could, find a way to finish up with a winning record this season. Now, for Duke and head coach Manny Diaz, of course, last year he was able to keep the momentum going that his predecessor Mike Elko had created in Durham for this program. Duke won 9 games for the second time in 3 years, but let's see what they're going to be able to do this time around. They bring in the former Tulane quarterback Darian Mensah. What's he going to be able to do? But I like this defense with defensive end Wesley Williams as well as free safety Trey Moore. Then you've got Stanford. And of course, Stanford football has really fallen on hard times, regardless if they're playing in the Pac 12 or the ACC. They've got themselves a new head coach and former Carolina Panthers head coach Frank Reich. Stanford, they've gone 3-9 in each of the last 4 years. And the bottom line is that ain't good. Okay. They got to start from the bottom with this program because you think about where it was with Jim Harbaugh and where it was with David Shaw. The Cardinal program is really falling off. I know that they brought in former Stanford quarterback Andrew Luck as the program's GM. They're trying to get this thing turned around. Their offense was 120th in the nation last year. So the bottom line is, the very least, I could say Stanford will be a work in progress. And finally, there's the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Okay, they've got themselves a new head coach, former Washington State head coach Jake Dickert. He's got to try to reverse the fortunes of this Wake Forest program, which is not going to be easy. Not a lot of talent for this team in Winston-Salem. So let's see if the Demon Deacons can be respectable this year in the ACC. But when it's all said and done, looking at the Atlantic Coast Conference, I think the teams that are going to compete for the championship, I like Clemson's chances. I like SMU in that mix. I'm putting Miami in that mix as well as Louisville. But when it's all said and done, I think we're going to have a rematch of last year's championship game between Clemson and SMU. And I do not think that the results waver. I think Clemson going into this season is the best team in the ACC. And I think throughout this college football campaign, Clemson will flex their muscles and show that they are the best team in the ACC. Now, for the other teams that I mentioned that I feel are going to be in championship contention, a la Miami, Louisville, and SMU, of course, with this expanded college football playoff, just because you don't win your league doesn't mean that you can't make the playoff. However, the ACC is clearly not on the same ground that the SEC and the Big Ten are. We saw it last year. The two teams that made it to the playoff from the ACC were in the championship game. The ACC is not going to be afforded the opportunity to have the wiggle room like the Big Ten and SEC are. Meaning, you know what? They're going to have teams not get to their championship game and get into the college football playoffs. So I think it's going to be so important, first and foremost, to try to win your league if you're the ACC, to guarantee yourself a spot in the college football playoff. But nonetheless, I could see a scenario where the ACC probably gets two teams for the college football playoff. However, this time around, with my top 25, as well as the coaches poll that was released today, we did see some love for the ACC. I don't think Clemson was ranked as high as they should be. That's just my opinion. But nonetheless, I'm buying stock in the Tigers. I'm buying stock in Dabo Sweeney. I think that the ACC is once again their league to lose. And of course, like I said before, since 2015, it's been all about Clemson and the ACC. Everybody's trying to catch up to them. A lot of people wanted to write Dabo off. Of course, Dabo, has not been a guy who wants to hit up the transfer portal to go out there and get players from other teams. He believes in recruiting his kids out of high school and developing them. He has not wavered from his program, from his philosophies, in spite of the fact that some people outside of that room might think differently. And you know what? The success is still there. I think Miami is going to be a very good team this year, as well as SMU and Louisville. And the thing I like about the ACC this year, all of those top teams play each other. So there's not going to be any hiding. There's not going to be any question marks as far as saying, you know what, who did this or who didn't do that, and who deserves to be here and who doesn't. The bottom line is talk is cheap, and you got to go out there and take care of your business on the field. And I think that right there is going to make this very exciting. But like I said before, I feel like the ACC is Clemson's to lose, and I don't think Clemson disappoints this year. Joseph, what is going on, my man? Good evening to you. You can see, you said, I could see maybe this year, if the money starts being spent, SMU will improve, and I hope the Pony Express returns in a few years. I'll say this: I think the Pony Express, in some cases, is back, my man. SMU, unfortunately, they got pushed by the wayside going back a couple of generations. We all know about the death penalty. All right. And then, the fall of the Southwest Conference. And of course, basically, Arkansas, not to sound, too long winded, but of course, Arkansas got that party started when they jumped to the ACC. And you had Texas, Texas A&M, and Baylor and Texas Tech, who all got a seat at the table in the Big 12, the original Big 12. When those four schools that I just mentioned, merged with the Big 8 schools, and then of course it left SMU and Rice and TCU, and Houston on the outside looking in, and those schools have fought and scrapped to try to once again be relevant. And of course, Houston was an afterthought. SMU, forget about it. The same thing with TCU for so many years. And then you have Rice, and Rice has never recovered, okay, since the Southwest Conference went under. And you think about the folks at SMU, it took them a long time to get back into a power conference. And SMU, you think about it, they've got the green light to once again go out there and spend money. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody spent money like the Mustangs did back in the days. And I think if you give them in the Dallas area that opportunity, I think we're going to see that success once again on the gridiron. And we're seeing it right now. I like SMU to once again be one of the top teams in this league. And I think the Mustangs are coming. Okay, that's just my thoughts right there. Like I said before, I got them getting back to the ACC championship game, and I also like their chances to possibly get back to the college football playoff. But let's see if the ACC can do enough this time around to host some first round games, or maybe even get a first round bye. We got to wait and see. But like I said, it's going to be a very exciting football season upcoming in the Atlantic Coast Conference. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank each and every one of you for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. First things first, if you like what you heard and saw in this podcast, you know what to do. Just hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. And for all of you college football buffs out there, I've been talking about the upcoming season, conference by conference. We've done the Big Ten. We've done the SEC. Do the ACC tonight. Tomorrow, it is all going to be about the Big 12. Now, Joseph, if you're still listening, I take it that you're an SMU fan. You've got some former Southwest Conference teams in the Big 12 to talk about as well. And I'm talking about Houston, and I'm talking about TCU. And I'll tell you like this, call me an old school guy, but I would love the idea and the concept if for college football we got back to an all Texas conference, kind of like how the Southwestern Conference was. Okay, you throw all of those teams into that mix. I know UTSA, they are, an up and coming program, as is Texas State. Just throw them all into that pot and just basically go old school with it. Treat it like the high school days where everybody just got on a bus and drove across the state, as opposed to catching planes and going around the country to play conference games. Just my 2 cents. The old school guy in me would love to see things go back to that, because I'm old enough to remember the Southwest Conference when it existed. But nonetheless, folks, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'd be my pleasure to follow you right back. And the same goes for Instagram, where you can check me out at 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge. Also, Joseph, if you're still there, please don't be a stranger. Definitely appreciate your comment. Definitely would like to have you coming back and joining some more of these podcasts and dropping some more comments. Definitely appreciate it, my man. Also, for anybody out there on Facebook, you can check us out at Sports Depot 365. And as far as I'm concerned, one of the better sports debating groups going around on social media. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off and I'm saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.